The Legal Mindset Corner will begin after a brief word from today's sponsor, Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our 24/7 virtual receptionist team.
I've been utilizing Answering Legal for my firm since 2015, and truth be told, it was a game changer for me. I can be anywhere, and I'm getting my phones answered by Answering Legal. A strategic partner, as I call Answering Legal, provides a great reward. What is that reward? It's time. Time for whatever I want to do. As a private practitioner, I would highly recommend Answering Legal to other private practitioners. Now, every call goes answered.
Welcome to all of our audience members. Hello. Welcome to the fourth and final day of Answering Legal's Law Firm Summer Reboot Camp. We're your guest hosts for this segment. I am Becky Howlett and my co-host Cynthia Sharp and our lovely guest Sara Ellis, who will be introducing shortly. We'd like to personally welcome you to our first live episode of the Legal Mindset Corner. Yay! Applause for that. So I am Becky Howlett, and I am, I am an attorney and a certified contemplative practices teacher. Introducing my co-host, the lovely Cynthia Sharp. Cindy practiced law from 1982 to 2009, so she is a seasoned veteran attorney. And since 2010, she has helped solo and small firm attorneys build successful and sustainable law practices. Actually, in 2019, I got to brag on her a little bit. She was recognized as Trainer of the Year by ABA's Solo and Small Firm and General Practice Division. So brush your shoulders up. And alongside Cindy and myself, we co-founded LegalBurnout.com during the height of pandemic pandemonium, with the idea of helping attorneys effectively manage stress, cultivate healthy work environments, and hopefully prevent and avoid burnout. So Cindy and I are really committed to generating open and honest conversations about those pervasive yet often viewed as taboo issues in the profession. That includes things like mental health, substance abuse, and suicide. So we are just so happy to have our guest, Sara Ellis, joining us for today's episode of the Legal Mindset Corner. We really wanted to emphasize attorney wellness and strategies to promote well-being, especially during the summer months, in the spirit of your camp. So overall, we're really hoping that we can explore some small practical ways that lawyers can use to foster their well-being in their law practices, in their lives. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest, Sara Ellis. Sara is an attorney, a mental health counselor, a public speaker, and an advocate. She's dedicated to assisting lawyers, physicians, and other professionals in careers where mental health challenges are often ignored, stigmatized, and left untreated. Sara works to help her clients both individually and by changing how seeking help is perceived in professional communities. Round of applause for that. Sara is also a member of the board of directors for the Lawyers Depression Project, which provides free and confidential online peer-to-peer support for members of the legal profession. We're definitely going to be having her talk to us more about that. She has previously worked with the Vanderbilt Comprehensive Assessment Program, where she conducted comprehensive fitness for duty assessments for professionals with substance abuse and mental health disorders. And this past year, she provided group and individual therapy to executives in recovery in West Palm Beach. I want to talk more about that. That sounds so interesting. And finally, before earning her Master's of Science in Social Work, Sara was an entertainment and intellectual property litigator who predominantly worked on music copyright cases, including Williams versus Bridgeport, the Blurred Lines case. So, wow, you're kind of famous, Sara. And she currently resides in South Florida with her husband and two adorable golden retrievers who may or may not make an appearance, Copper and Lexi. So thank you so much, Sara, for joining us. We're so thrilled to connect with another attorney who is committed to stopping the stigma and fostering this system-wide change in our profession. So thank you so much for all you do and for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Becky and Cindy, and for this opportunity to participate in the Reboot Boot Camp or the Reboot Camp and, kind of continue to get the message out there and continue to normalize these discussions so they aren't taboo and they don't just hang out there in silence.
Well, I'm just intrigued about that here we have before us an obviously very successful litigator, and yet you upended your career in the middle of all of it and decided to shift gears. And so what caused you to do this?
Well, much like the two of you, I had a giant pandemic shift. First of all, I loved doing intellectual property litigation, and it is something that I was passionate about even in undergrad. And it was a dream working on exactly the type of cases that I wanted to work on. And most people I know never get that chance, and definitely don't get it at the level that I was working at very early, like within the first year of my career. But I kind of learned that it was really more the area of law that I was interested in rather than the actual practice of law. And all the other things that came with it, the hourly demands, the pressure, just the mindset of the community, the daily deadlines, just kind of the negative mindset that comes along in a lot of practices was not a good fit for me. And as my practice kind of moved a little bit out of entertainment, I started seeing, okay, I really don't love this as much as I did when I started. And I've always been interested in mental health. And my husband was, you've been talking about being a therapist for a really long time. Like, why don't you just make the move? And kind of sat down and eliminated all of my reasons not to do it / excuses. And he kind of let me see it in a way I wasn't able to see it on my own. And that this could be a positive change for me. And so during the pandemic, when everything was shut down, I made that change from shifting law and applied to schools. And there happened to be a college of social work right where I was living in Nashville at the time. And it was the same as my alma mater for law school. So I took the plunge.
I love that so much. And I was just talking with somebody yesterday about how I just have so much respect for people who recognize that, some aspect of their lives is not working. It's not serving their highest and best self. And they have the courage to make a change. And you are absolutely in that category. And you talked a little bit about the mindset of the profession. I want to tease that out a little bit. What do you think, what is it that's holding attorneys back from putting themselves first, from really prioritizing their health and their well-being?
There's so many things, I think. I think a lot of it comes with the external validation that we're used to getting, probably from a young age. Most attorneys probably excel. I didn't start out excelling academically when I was younger. But by the time we're in college, law school, etc., we're used to this external validation of literally assigning grades to our success. And I think getting into that mindset for year after year after year, we continue to chase that external validation, which can be, seem difficult to achieve if you're not giving it your all. I think another part of it is the adversarial aspects that we have in law that other careers don't have. You don't have opposing doctors in the operating room. You don't have opposing pilots in commercial aviation. We have those things that kind of will also kind of help us doubt ourselves and who we are, that are commonplace. And then I think honestly, just the long hours and workload kind of take you out of being able to even set time aside to really think about things. And I'll say that for myself, I have done the most development in my multi-decade life in the last 2 years. And I think a large part of that is because I was in, a mental health program and talking about it every day. But I think the biggest part was I had the time to think about it for the first time in my life. And I think all of these things can come together to various degrees for each person. Everyone's situation is going to be different. But I think all of these things can kind of come together to overall just create a kind of the perfect storm that makes it hard to take care of ourselves.
And can I just dovetail off of that really quickly? I just have to share this little aside, and then I want you to ask Sarah a question. But to your point about chasing external validation, when I got into therapy, my therapist asked me, can you make a timeline of your life, of major life events that happened to you? So this was my timeline. And I literally turned this in without even batting an eye. And, obviously we deconstructed it over time. But the timeline said, 1989, born. The next entry on the timeline was 2007, graduated high school. 2011, graduated college. 2014, graduated law school. It was literally just my academic accomplishments were literally the only thing I put on my major life thing. So I was like, when you spoke of that, I was like, that's me.
I feel very seen by that. Mine would be the same. And my, to kind of go with the external validation, I think probably in every single session, my therapist would say, Sarah, you don't have to be perfect. And I'm like, yes, I do. What are you talking about?
It's ingrained in us as lawyers. I remember that at one of my first jobs as a professor's assistant, he said to me, here's how we operate in this office. If it's not perfect, it's wrong. And setting that really almost impossible standard is just sets us up for failure and for not being in a position to improve our self-concept. And in our roles as attorneys, I think that you've pointed out that one of the obstacles is time. That we don't make the time. So now we're in the dog days of summer. And can you give some specific tips on lawyers who are ready to change their mindset, ready to set aside even a little bit of time as some activities or steps they could engage in?
Yeah, I've become a huge fan of practicing micro resilience, which is really, I don't know if you're familiar with the book, The Minor Shifts for Major Boosts by Bonnie St. John and Alan P. Haynes. But I don't know if they originated it, but they're definitely major spokespersons of the movement of doing micro resilience. And micro resilience isn't the same thing as big life shifts, like you need to exercise more or lose weight or, get more sleep. It's about, in the long run it is, but it's about making small changes, for your mind and your body and your spirit, just even down to like prioritizing your day better and attacking the things that are most important to you when you're fresh. Getting up and moving. So if you can take a meeting while you're walking around the block rather than sitting in your office, that will get your brain going, your oxygen flowing, and you're spending the exact same amount of time. I take a lot of my calls that way. And in addition to the Lawyer Suppression Project, I'm also on the board of the Higher Calling Foundation, which deals with addiction in the workplace. And, when I'm on calls for that, I just put in the ear pods and I go for a walk because I don't need to be in front of my computer. And it serves the benefit of getting rid of distractions, getting the blood going, getting the oxygen flowing, and letting me move during that time rather than just sitting in one place. and then taking times to, really just we're kind of live in a world of stress and stressful triggers all day long. And these come from a very primitive, innate place for us. These were necessary in the times when we were roaming the world with nothing but animal skins on our back. And, to be afraid of a big angry bear was really important for us to stay alert. But now that big angry bear is a big angry partner. And so we're on alert when we don't need to be. It's not life or death, but our body is reacting like it is, and it keeps us geared up. So finding a way to kind of keep ourselves calmer, and finding ways, such as, deep breathing before a stressful experience, or avoiding catastrophizing, avoiding your runaway thoughts, but all of these things I think start with really, really small steps. And I'll give you one very unexpected one that has worked for me is, I mentioned walking. A few months ago, I would say maybe in April, I started just taking small walks. It was the end of school. I was getting ready to graduate. I was working on a lot of emotionally intense projects because I was involved in a trauma program. And so, you deal with trauma a lot, and I was finding myself being a little overwhelmed at times. So I would just take a walk to relax. And those short walks turned into long walks, which is now turned into me training for a half marathon. So if you told me in April, hey Sarah, you should train for a half marathon, I'd be like, that's crazy. I don't run. I don't even walk. and, and now that these small steps have led to much bigger steps. And I think, if someone had approached me with that big step to begin with, I would have been like, that's not possible. I can't do that. But starting slow, I'm like, oh yeah, this is absolutely possible. And this is my plan of how I'm going to do it.
Yeah, so you're really able to just build on yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And some people can make those giant steps. I am not one of them. I need the small steps. And it's even changed the way I see things because I've just started. I'm just right at the 5K distance now. I have a long way to go, but I think, I'm I'm 10% of the way there. I'm 15% of the way there. And that has made a big difference in even my perception of accomplishing things. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be the best of what you're capable of. And I'm never going to be an, Olympic runner, but I can do what I can do, and that's good enough.
Don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. And I just want to say, Sarah, I don't think you're alone. I think that's most people, that it's much easier for us to do these small changes. Cindy and I really try to emphasize that in our programming because, we've even talked about, setting resolutions and New Year's resolutions and how the vast majority don't stick, because people are trying to take on, those huge shifts, like you're saying, going from 1 to 100. And to your point about the micro resilience, thank you for bringing that up. And it's actually kind of shocking to me that Cynthia Sharp has never heard of this book, because that is the most well-read person I know. So for you to turn her on to a resource like that, but it just reminds me, Sid, of when we met the attorneys from Alaska, the estate planning attorneys, and so you were talking about, Cynthia, that office culture of the partner wanted perfection. And it reminded me what you were saying about, taking a meeting when you're doing a walk. So these attorneys from Alaska, they actually did running meetings.
Wow.
That was, I know. So we had an all day conference, and there was only about an hour in between that and the dinner. And we saw these attorneys going out, these partners, so they're the leaders of their firms, going out in the rain to run, because that was the only time they had. And, they were so fit. You could really tell that they prioritized themselves. And that just made me think of that, because, they were taking it upon themselves. They were building the culture they wanted. And it just, what you're saying, reminded me of that.
And just one more comment about the habits that you've developed in your life. What I kept hearing is that you were outside. You were out in nature.
Yeah.
Which has that healing effect. Becky and I, whenever we have that rare opportunity to be live together, since I'm in Philadelphia and she's in Kansas City, we always make it a priority for us to get outside. For example, we were in a conference for close to 3 days in Indiana, the Indiana State Bar Solo and Small Firm Conference. We were speakers. And there was one of the afternoons where we had a 2.5 hour time frame. And what did Becky say is, hey, let's go hike. And we've got pictures of us out there seeing deer. And we came back totally recharged. And while we may not have specifically discussed business the entire hike, it bonded us more than we already were. And how could that be? But also just recharging.
Absolutely. I love
Yes.
running outside. I walk to the park near my house, and that's where I go run. And to go along with that, since I'm in South Florida and it's 1,000 degrees, I get up really early. Not for me, it's really early. I get up and I go run at 6 o'clock every day because it's the coolest part of the day. But to go with that is like, I take this water bottle everywhere. And, it's part of like one of those micro resilience things of drink more water is going to say, put yourself in situations where you can be more successful because, if I just wanted to, and here you have to drink water all the time. And, I got this and I literally carry this with me everywhere like a purse. And it has significantly changed my input because I have it with me. Now, if I throw it in a backpack or my purse or whatever, I'm not going to drink it. But having it on hand, it just literally, now it's a part of my day. Is I leave the house, even if I'm going on errands in my car, it goes with me. And it's about really, it's making changes can be hard. Even small changes, humans we don't like change. But if you find ways to facilitate the changes you want to make and make it easier or enjoyable or exciting, I think that can really help along with the process. Even if it's as small as just getting something, that can carry around on your hip and you can put your phone in.
And myself, I know one of the things that I always carry with me is some kind of food. I am all about the food. And if I'm having I plan my meals because, fail to plan, you plan to fail. And to make sure I have nutritious food in the household, but then also just carrying like nuts and dried fruit with me. Then if I run into a jam where I can't eat right away, I've got something so I'm not grabbing for junk, which is what
Exactly. And that's actually one of the things that they touch on in the micro resilience book too, is carrying nutritious food with you to keep your brain fueled. Because if you don't have what you need with you, you're going to get the closest thing or what you're craving, and it's not going to be as healthy as something that you pre-planned.
And the other big thing I heard, in what you were talking about, Sarah, was, getting this, it really was speaking to habit formation, instead of like, getting ourselves in that active decision. Am I going to work out? Am I going to take a walk? Am I going to do this? You have built it into your daily routine such that it's a habit. Like, you're talking about your water bottle. Like, you're like, when I leave, I have the water bottle. I have it visible right by me so I can see it. I just wanted to speak to that because I know for me, that's been something that has been really helpful. And especially with the habit formation, it's like, like you said, change is hard. And when you're building a new change, something that has been successful for me is hitching it to another habit. So for example, if there was like a self-care thing in the morning, like maybe, you wanted to do some skin, stuff in the morning. It's like, okay, hitch it to brushing your teeth, something that you're already doing. And so then that can help you facilitate that, just becoming part of your everyday routine.
Yeah, and I'd say to add on to that too is develop a support system. Whether that, so for me with the running, I've joined like the Run Disney Facebook group and seeing posts every day about encouragement. I have, a training app that I use for my runs and track everything. And those two together, one to track my runs, tell me how much I run every day, for how long, for how far, what days, and then having this kind of community who's all interested in the same thing. Because living in Florida, obviously, you have to go and do the Disney marathons. Like those have been really. I think the reason I've stuck with this is in part because of having kind of a structure and a support system. Because if I just I want to run, I'd be done by now. I would I would not know what I was doing. I would not know when. I'd probably overexert myself. But having these things to help guide me have made me, I think, even though I'm still early on, way more successful than I would have been if I just tried to do it on my own.
Yeah, Becky and I, she's probably my major support system in health habits. We're in contact almost on a daily basis. And as we're scheduling our business meetings, each of us, it feels very free to say, well, I can't meet from 11 to 12 because that's when I'm working out, my scheduled workout, or I'm going to yoga at that time. And we each support each other in that type of decision. So you're so right. Having both the accountability partner as well as just the support.
Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, I was just talking about the same thing last night with someone, that the importance, so how critical that supportive community is. I know for myself personally, and Cindy knows, once I really felt like that was really missing from my life for a really long time. And then I finally, found local community, like you say, interested in the same things I was, and we could build around that. And once I really put that supportive community piece in place, things just clicked. I mean, everything just started clicking. And I want to shift gears a little bit related to that point, because I know in our research, we've seen that having that strong support system is the number one thing someone could do to help protect themselves from becoming traumatized. And I know that as part of your Master's of Social Work degree, you actually got a certificate in trauma training. So I'd love to talk to you more about that, Sara, because you were bringing it up before about living in fight or flight.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so part of my program was to get additional or specialized training in trauma, which had to do with general trauma treatment, trauma in children, trauma in adults. I think being aware of trauma and how it can affect you is really important for lawyers, because we kind of come about it in two ways. One, we come about it in our own lives, the same way other people do. The traumas that we experience in childhood and even in adulthood, and having to deal with that just the same as much as other humans have to deal with it. And then we also are in a field where we have to deal with secondary trauma, where we deal with, not so much as an entertainment attorney, but when you deal with divorces, child abuse, crime, or even, on a smaller but still important level, to stress out clients who are involved in litigation, and which is new for them and stressful for them and hard on them. And we kind of suck that in like sponges. And, secondary trauma, vicarious trauma, those are very big things. And when you already maybe have your own foundation of untreated trauma or even treated trauma, that can add an extra burden on you. So it's important for lawyers to know that they're susceptible to that, and also know, some of the signs and symptoms, which, are very similar to your typical burnout and stress symptoms. But knowing that, that you have extra exposure, the way people in medical or first responder fields may also have.
And it's nice to see, like in Becky's and my research, at least this concept is being accepted, because I know that in one of the interviews that we read, if someone is going through or has had primary trauma or experiencing secondary trauma, if they're not believed, then that adds another level of burden to the whole situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not feeling heard, not feeling believed can be a really diminishing experience and a really lonely experience. So I think it's important to know that one, trauma is has real life, both mental and physical effects. People who've experienced trauma have much shorter lifespans, more likely to get cancer, more likely to get heart disease. Like, there are absolute correlated physical effects that come with it. It is a real burden to carry. And then also, the depression, the anxiety, PTSD, and even PTSD related to ongoing traumas. So say if you're like, hey, I've had a really trauma-free life, I've been fortunate, but you also go to a job and you're verbally abused every day, that adds up over time to help be a cumulative trauma experience, and that's just as real.
Yeah, and you mentioned before about, we're dealing with stressed out clients, but oftentimes we're dealing with stressed out colleagues, stressed out bosses, that culture that we've talked about. Sorry, the cat feeder's going on if you can hear them. But which, we understand from our research that, yeah, just being exposed to someone who is experiencing secondary trauma themselves increases your risk.
That's amazing. And, often that can get passed on too, especially if it's in a situation where it's a partner in a leadership position. It gets kind of filtered down. There's this tradition of like, passing on that struggle that they had to go through. The transference of suffering, those are the words I was looking to. The transference of suffering that the legal profession seems to love. Like, I did it, so you have to too. I went through, hell in law school. So that's the way it just needs to be, because that's the way it is. It's this transference of suffering, rather than realizing maybe if we didn't traumatize law students, it could be better. Like, there was a study done, this is an older study, but, more recent studies back it up, is when law students enter, or prospective law students enter, and they matriculate to their first year, they are as healthy or mentally healthy as the general population, with their rates of depression around 10%. By the end of their first year, I'm going to get the numbers wrong a little bit. I think it goes up to like 20 something percent. And by the time they graduate from law school, it's a 40% rate. And so yeah, 10% law, 10% when they enter, 32% by the end of law 1L, and 40% by graduation. Clearly, something is happening in that very short collective time span of their life, really for no other reason than because everyone else had to do it before.
I've heard that from a boss in practice. It became very clear to me there's two types of people, like you're saying, I went through it, so you're going to suffer through. And then the people who say, hey, I had this experience, I want you to avoid that. So here's some strategies so you can avoid that. I had a mentor in law school, and another student went to them. This was a very close mentor of mine. Another student went to them and said, hey, I'm really struggling. Like, I'm finding that I can't do all my reading and also sleep an appropriate length of time. What should I do? And the professor said, you'll figure it out. And I've always felt like that was, that never has sat right with me. And to your point, it's like we are creating these institutions, these systems, and as I'm sure Cindy can tell you, that's kind of not a good policy position. Well, this is always the way we've done it, so that's how we should do it. That's kind of a cop out. Really stifles innovation, like creativity, change. So anyway, I interrupted you, Sid. I just had to share those stories from my own life because I was like, I've seen that in practice and in law school.
Oh, absolutely. And what I was going to bring up is I had taken a look at Sarah's LinkedIn page this morning. And one of the things that's really shocked me is I didn't realize that the lawyer suicide rate was 5 times the rate of the general population. And this culture certainly explains it. And another point that I read that really ties in one of your posts is that you said it's allyship is vital in mental health. And so can you comment on that just a little bit more about how we can be allies?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's supporting people, even if it's not an experience that you yourself can identify with. For example, I mentioned that I'm on the board for the Higher Calling Foundation, which helps people who have been suffering from substance misuse kind of get their professional lives back on track, whether it's through training, reshaping resumes, helping people get their identifications back, if it was sold, to pay for drugs, to help, with treatment, things of that nature. I don't consider, I'm not in recovery. I've never had an issue with addiction to substances, but being involved in that organization is important to me because a big part of its goal is to reduce stigma of people who were suffering from addiction or experiencing addiction. And it doesn't, I don't have to have lived that to know that it's important to support it. And even if you can say like, hey, there's plenty of people on this planet that have never been depressed or never been anxious. I personally have been depressed and anxious my entire life. I very much know what that feels like. And I also know how isolating it is to feel that way. And, I think even if you can't say, I can't identify with that, but I can help and I can be there and I can treat you as not other, I can treat you as a fellow human being. And I think standing up in any community that needs our allyship, any traditionally oppressed community that needs and deserves our allyship of people who are in power, people who can have those voices. I don't think it's any different with mental health and normalizing, as many people who experience, mental health concerns in this country. And in addition, in our profession, lawyers rank first in loneliness. 36% of lawyers deal with hazardous drinking. Lawyers are 3.5 times more likely to suffer from depression. As you mentioned, they're 5 times more likely to die by suicide. You don't need to see yourself in that statistic to help others not be that statistic.
Well, I love the work you're doing on destigmatizing substance use disorder in the workplace, because traditionally when people talk about an alcoholic, it's like, oh, they're an alcoholic. Whereas if someone had cancer, you wouldn't say, oh, well, they've got cancer. And it's getting the mental health on par with other health issues.
Absolutely. It's all it's all a matter of parity. And I don't know if you're familiar with Patrick Kennedy's book, A Common Struggle. Patrick Kennedy is, Ted Kennedy's son and also served in the House of Representatives and, has very public, issues with substance misuse or history of substance misuse and mental health, and has like his father Ted Kennedy, really worked towards having legal parity for mental health as of physical health, but what we need is societal treatment, parity in how we treat people who are experiencing issues with mental health versus those who are not.
And Sarah, can you tell us a little bit, speaking of mental health and, and getting parity, can you tell us a little bit about the Lawyers Depression Project and, some of the resources that your organization provides?
Absolutely. Lawyers Depression Project is, the name's a little bit of a misnomer because it's not just about depression and it's not just for lawyers. It's for any mental health condition that you're suffering from. It's not an emergency service. So if you're having an emergency, you should call the National Helpline. But if you're a law student, paralegal, legal admin, member of the judiciary, lawyer, it's for you. It is a free and confidential service. We don't work with or report to lapse. We have, your name and emergency contact information, and it says, no one else has it. People even join anonymously, like with an initial in the meetings. If you don't want that information out there, it is to the level that you are comfortable with. Some people, when I'm in the meetings, I'm Sara Ellis. Some people are just an initial. And it's really just about having a safe community for people to discuss what they're going through, either long-term or a daily basis. And we have support groups several times a week. And we also have a discussion board with various sub-issues of what people might be experiencing. But really, when it comes down to it, it's a community of legal professionals, although I will say it is 99% attorneys, who need a safe place to talk about their life experiences. And among people who absolutely can identify with those experiences, because that's one thing I have found working in mental health is even mental health trained professionals, like they might be trained in mental health, but they don't necessarily know what lawyers specifically experience and the expectations and the pressures. Now they might be able to empathize with those, but it's hard. Like my therapist who every session said, you don't have to be perfect. I think her messaging, she was amazing, but I think her messaging might have been different if she really understand that in my world, that's reality. You might as well have told me that the sky wasn't blue, because it is my reality that perfection is the expectation and anything less is failure. Again, that is not actual reality, but it was my reality. And I think that is a benefit of the Lawyers Depression Project, because every single person in every single meeting understands or can at least truly get whatever your experience is, because they can relate to it.
Yeah, and it's a matter of reconditioning yourself and learning that just because you make yourself vulnerable, that's not a sign of weakness. That's a sign of strength.
It's a strength. Absolutely. It is such I think that's part of, even just looking at my running. I'm not fast. I'm probably never going to be fast, but I can still look at, improvements that I've made and be really, really proud of them, of what I can do. I don't need to worry about that. I'm never going to be a top athlete. Well, first of all, I'm old, so it's not going to happen anyway. But, it doesn't, it's enough that I do it for me. And that's really not a mindset that I would have had previously. Without doing some work on myself over the last 2 years.
Well, we can't wait till the update when you're training for the full marathon, Sarah. That I think that's coming next. We've gone to the halfway point. Now we'll stay tuned. Well, we're nearing the end of our time together, but I want to ask, Sarah, what do you think is the single most important takeaway you want our audience members to leave with today?
I think if you're looking for a sign to make a change, use this as a sign to make a change. And that change doesn't have to be a big one. It can be whatever change you're capable of making today. If that one change is like, I'm going to drink one glass of water now and not worry about the next one. Make that one step, that one change. Do what you can when you can, and do not criticize yourself for not being able to do more.
Great wisdom.
Thank you so much for being with us, Sarah. This was a fabulous program. That's all we have time for today for this episode of the Legal Mindset Corner. Thank you so much again to you, Sarah, to all of our audience members for joining us here today. You can check out more episodes of our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as the Answering Legal's YouTube channel. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.